Carlos. Thank you. Senator Kaine, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to our witnesses. It's good to be back before you. Ambassador Edelman, 11 times testifying here, and Jane, probably about the equivalent. We should give you guys some steak knives or something. I mean, very helpful report. A couple of thoughts before I ask some questions. Ambassador Edelman, you mentioned your testimony earlier when you talked about potential for nuclear collaboration between China and Russia. You were kind of criticized for that. And I remember that. And frankly, the Pentagon, during the entire time I've been here, beginning in 2013, when we asked questions about the possibility of cooperation between Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, they've kind of poo-pooed the idea as if historical enmities or border disputes or the past would block them from being able to work in a collaborative way. And I've always found that dismissive attitude naive. And I think that the results of today are showing the degree to which these nations, seeing the U.S.'s strong alliances, realizing they don't have them, they're drawn closer and closer together. There may be barriers to the level of cooperation, but we shouldn't assume those barriers are going to inhibit significant collaboration. And I think that's one of the aspects of your testimony, your joint testimony in the report, that's very powerful. I did chuckle at one of the punchlines, which is that we need to do a lot more defense spending and bring the deficit down too. We hear that punchline at a lot of hearings in a lot of different committees, but that's why, that's why we get elected to do what we do, and there are tough choices to be made. Here's a question that I have. If you asked American public, and I do think educating the public about the challenge is important. If you said, what's the most important national security threat today? I bet the top one would be fentanyl. I think before just the American public would cite Ukraine or would cite the possibility of a war against Taiwan, I bet they would say fentanyl. The National Defense Strategy in 2022 had one paragraph about the Western Hemisphere. You have a section dealing with Africa and Latin America that is a much longer paragraph. I like that. And yet it's about Africa and Latin America, and it talks about the fact that China and Russia are making Africa and Latin America real centers of activity. And as the chairman of the Americas Subcommittee on Foreign Relations, when I travel in the Americas again and again and again, from governments left, right, center, or unpredictable, what I hear is we'd rather work with you than with China, for example, but you're not present. Yeah, we appreciate you lecturing us not to accept a free 5G system from China, but what do you have on the table? We appreciate you telling us not to allow Russia to help with port investments, but what do you have on the table? And I think the fact that we spend so little intellectual energy focusing on our own hemisphere, and I just match that up against, I think, the American public would say fentanyl is like the biggest challenge, national security challenge that they see every day. Now, this committee's done some good work. We have done significant investments in fentanyl interdiction technology. I had a chance to see some of it that is being piloted in Brownsville about 2 weeks ago that I think will really help us. Senator Ernst and I, in last year's NDA, did a provision that calls for greater mill-to-mill cooperation between the United States and Mexican militaries on the fentanyl issue. But why don't we just spend more energy on the Americas? What blocks us from more focus in the hemisphere? And I just worry we can't see at our own backyard to, especially Chinese investments, and count on our ability to lecture about the danger of Chinese investments to carry the day.
I agree, and I think we all agree. We did meet the head of Southcom. We met the head of AFRICOM, both of whom told us that we're investing in Latin America and in Africa.
And just in Africa, a stat. Of the 35 youngest countries in the world, 32 are in Africa.
Well, and
so in terms of a youth bulge and a growing population, I mean, this is where the future is.
I think the population in Africa is going to double by 2050, and it will be the most populous continent, I think. in the world. I'm not positive that it will exceed China and India, but I think it will. And we're underinvesting. And in South America, for example, we heard that there are 5 countries with no ambassadors, no confirmed ambassadors. And our military footprint in Africa is decreasing. I think we all agree on this commission that investment has to improve. And again, our whole idea about all elements of national power has to include partners and allies in those regions. Not an afterthought, not to say, oh yeah, about Africa and South America. And on fentanyl, I believe that President Biden and President Xi, when they met in San Francisco, came up with some deal on China policing the precursors of fentanyl, which come into our country mostly, I think, through Mexico. That deal hasn't been fully implemented, but it's a start. And it's absolutely important, given how devastating fentanyl is to young people in this country who take drugs unsuspecting that they're laced with fentanyl. It's absolutely crucial as a national security threat to us that we do more.
Thank you. My time is up. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kaine. Senator